week's episode is dedicated to that one friend who hates it when you cry. There's no crying in baseball. There's no crying in baseball. There's no crying in pickleball either, or bowling, or golf. There's no crying, and there's especially no crying at the taqueria, because I don't want your salty tears near my guac and queso. There's no crying at the Mexican restaurant. You know the one. Hello, and welcome to the Emotional Endurance Movement, the only mental health comedy game show that's asking you, how are you feeling? I'm Lori Sharp-Page, and welcome to the most fun you're going to have taking care of your mental health all week. I want to go ahead and introduce our perennial contestant, our behaviorist at large, and someone who actually got up before 8 a.m. to drive to meet the mayor this morning. This is Crimson McDonald. I also want to introduce you, our viewer at home, who's taking our weekly survey so that you can show up, tell us how you are, build some emotional endurance, and have a real good time while you're doing it. This week's Insight of the Week is actually about tears. It comes to us from an artist who makes artwork out of tears. Her name is Rose Lynn Fisher, and she has created a collection called The Topography of Tears. And basically, she takes pictures of tears under a microscope to reveal the very startling and unexpected shapes and forms that they create. And in fact, there's some research to support that different types of cries, whether it be an emotional cry or a more pragmatic cry, you know, like when you're dealing with onions or something in the environment that's making your eyes water, actually produce different shapes and images. So this topography of tears is quite fascinating. And I like what she has to say about tears. Tears are the medium of our most primal language. In moments as unrelenting as death, as basic hunger, and as a complex rite of passage, they are evidence of our inner life overflowing its boundaries, spilling over into our consciousness, wordless and spontaneous. They can release us to the possibility of realignment, reunion, catharsis, intractable resistance, short-circuited, as in shedding of old skin. Shedding tears, shedding light, the light shed through a tear that illuminates the poetry of life. And I want to show you some of these images that she's captured from tears because they're quite amazing. So you can see here, look at these. Look at the difference between the tears of grief over here, the tears of change, the onion tears I told you about, the laughing tears. Isn't that interesting? And she's not the only artist that has done this sort of exploration of tears, but it's very fascinating. There seems to be some influence over what causes the tears that creates the shape or the imagery that presents within them. Isn't that fascinating?
That is the coolest thing I've seen in a long time. It really brings back the connection of body, soul, or mind, body, however you want to think of it, that there are physiological consequences to what's going on with you mentally. That's an amazing representation of that.
Yeah, it's very, very, very cool. So I brought this to the table today because we are actually going to talk about crying. And I feel that people, including myself, we often judge crying, right? And it's interesting to see the evidence of our tears presented in a different way, in an artistic way. I'm simply kind of obsessed with it.
And the mind-body connection is visually represented so well here.
It's fascinating. So thank you for all of this amazing art, Rose Lynn Fisher. Appreciate it. I learned something new by looking at these tears, and I hope that you remember this the next time you cry, that there's information, there's experience encoded in those tears. It's not just crying. It's so much more than that. Now let's hear what our emotional forecast for the week is from Crimson.
So yeah, Lori, looking at the data among our members in the emotional endurance movement, overall they're staying fairly regulated. We're at the 71% mark. But to be honest, you know, as a survey researcher, people tend to swing on the higher end or lower end. And so in my opinion, 70%, that's still kind of, you're not feeling confident in being regulated, right? Like that's, We got to keep in mind that most people aren't going to be like, oh, I'm a 2 and regulated. Most people say regulated most of the time. So I would say that means people are getting a little bit better than last week. They're feeling a little more regulated. But ultimately, it looks like the main triggers for the dysregulation was what we would expect in the week after the holidays: work, deadlines, family. So isn't it funny how family remains a consistent trigger?
Oh, family. The bringer of so much stuff.
Well, I mean, it is true. And we talk a lot about at our business Sprouting Change about bringing emotional regulation to the workforce. But as we can see, it's a major problem in our personal lives too. And as both of us know, speaking of onions, there are layers to our ability to stay regulated. And if you're dysregulated at home, you're likely bringing that to work too.
Yeah, absolutely. And vice versa. It goes both ways.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, that is a little bit of an increase in regulation over the last week. And I am happy to report that I was more regulated this week for the first time. I am back in the regulated bucket, and I'm so glad to hear that. And honestly, it's not that anything really changed other than like I just gave myself to kind of work through what was a tough couple of weeks, and I don't feel so like worn down now. So I have more in the tank, which definitely is a key thing for me. As soon as I'm worn down or depleted, most of us, this is true, it's like that's when the dysregulation really starts, which wears us out more and depletes us more, which is so unfair, but that's where we're at. So I'm happy to say that I'm back in the regulated bucket. How about you?
Yeah, I've been a little bit more regulated. Getting back in the routine was hard at first, but now that we're kind of getting in the swing of things, I think I would rate myself pretty high on the regulated mark this week.
Awesome. And what are people feeling this week? Like, what are the feelings that are coming up?
People were all over the place, honestly. I mean, we saw feelings of anxiety and angst, but also happiness. Honestly, I think a lot of people were happy to get back into the routine. Like, they got over that hump and now are feeling a little bit better. So on our feelings wheel, you see people kind of moving out of those more dreadful zones and into a little bit better of a place.
Well, our routine does keep us healthy, as much as it pains me to say that. Our routine is a key part of our mental health and our overall health. And it's important to recognize the role that it has, even when it feels like a total flippin' drag.
I hate routines, but they're so important.
Routines don't come naturally to me. Some people, they come very naturally too. And it's okay. We're all different. We all have different strengths and weaknesses. But I will say, even as somebody who really struggles with routine, I have learned, this is one of the gifts being a clinician has given me, I have learned how deeply important routine is to taking care of your mental health. It has an important role. And it also doesn't have to be a 20 million step routine. It can be a 1 to 2 step routine. A big part of what we're trying to do here at the Emotional Endurance Movement is get you used to just once or twice a week, checking in with your feelings, knowing what's going on, thinking about how you're coping, what's triggering additional stress in your life so that you can be more empowered to face whatever life hands you in a more regulated way, so you get more of the good stuff in life, the balance, the belonging, the meaning, the joy. That stuff is really hard to find when you're dysregulated. But if you can find that, you really are going to have much, much better outcomes. Yep. It's now time for our feeling of the week, which is sad. I know. You're thinking it's January. Why are we talking about sadness? Because it's January. January historically is one of the months where we experience sadness the most. Part of it is the letdown from the holiday seasons. Part of it is January. And part of it is the fact that if you were in the northern hemisphere, you don't get as much sunlight and vitamin D. And yes, that has a big impact on your mental health. Sadness is an emotional state that arises when our brain registers loss, disappointment, or unmet needs or expectations. It happens when there's something missing in our felt reality. Maybe it's different or gone or just not showing up the way that you thought it would. Sadness is not a failure state. It is emotion just like any other. And as you know, there is no good or bad emotions. They just are. Sadness is often a processing state. Its job is to slow you down long enough to notice, grieve, interact, or reorient. When sadness allows, it softens. When sadness is avoided, it often hardens into anxiety, irritability, numbness, or despair. It is important to learn how to cope effectively with sadness because it's one of our primary emotions. We experience it often, frequently. And again, it's not a sign that anything is going wrong. It's an important messenger to help us slow down and understand what is happening within us. The emotional equation for sad is a little bit more simple because it is a primary emotion. Sadness equals the loss, real or perceived, plus meaning. So there is something in your life that is missing, that you have lost, that you are longing for, and the meaning you have around it is part of what is making you sad, which is why it's important to process through and see if there's any opportunity to adjust that meaning or massage it in such a way that helps to soothe or alleviate the emotion. But sometimes, y'all, you just got to sit with the sadness and let it transition through you. This entire episode is built around the idea that sadness, crying, and even tears are important things in your life that you can attend to without resisting or fighting them. They have roles and they are important. How's our community feeling about sad this week?
I mean, of course, everyone, this is a core, to your point, like this is a core basic feeling. So everyone, this was chartered territory for them. But I think it's important to bring up because I think that, at least for me, when I think of sadness, my current state with it is the duality. That like I have to come to terms with the fact that if I want to be happy, I have to feel sad. And sadness is the loss of something that was meaningful, which you were lucky to have. And so it's a kind of a reframe thing where it happens a lot because there's a lot of loss in day-to-day life at the most micro to macro level.
Absolutely. We talk a lot about the big griefs in life. We don't often attend to the little ones. And the little ones have a compounding effect. And this is part of why it's so important to know, first of all, that the feeling of sadness is not a threat to you. It's not something that you need to push away or resent. And it's important to know that you can cope with it. And we're going to talk about some different ways that we cope with sadness as we go on through this episode. But if you're feeling sad today, I want you to know, number one, you're not alone. Number two, it has an important role in its life, even if it feels pretty uncomfortable. And number three, there are things that you can do to soothe yourself and to help yourself cope with it so it's not such a raw experience. The top 5 triggers for sadness were for our community this week. So let's hear what they got, Crimson.
All right. Do you want to take a guess?
Yeah, let's see. Work.
You were close. The first one was deadlines at work.
Deadlines at work.
Yes,
okay.
But the second one was work in general. So
just work in general.
Yeah, so work and work. But yeah, people aren't feeling the deadlines. People aren't feeling the hustle.
Oh, so having to go back and get back into like the swing of things is like making people feel kind of sad.
Yeah, and then family dynamics, not shocking. There's that family thing. Health concerns for themselves or others.
Yeah.
And then sensory overload.
Ooh.
I thought that was interesting. But I guess coming back into the new year, you're getting back to looking at your calendar. It's starting to fill up. I'm sure that that sense of ramping back up is hitting everyone.
Now we're going to play a new game called Tears to Cheers. And we're going to go through the top 5 things that triggered our audience's feeling of sadness over the past week. And we're going to talk about how we would cheer ourselves up, what we would do to help cope with sadness. Now, I want to start off with the sensory overwhelm because this is one I've been dealing with a lot recently. Sensory overwhelm is an interesting one because I think for up until recently, we haven't really talked about the fact that some people are more sensitive to sensory inputs than others. I am one of those people. And it wasn't until I got my first cat almost 13 years ago that I started to really understand and unpack what was happening with me. Loud noises, lights, people, interactions, a lot of different information coming at the same time. It spins me out big time. And the reason why having a cat helped me learn this is because if you pet your cat, you can be having a good time with your cat, chilling with your cat, all's good. And then the cat is like, ah. And you're like, whoa, kitty, what happened? Well, the cat got overstimulated. Mm-hmm. Cats notoriously can get overstimulated very easily. And I think we got to give ourselves the same leeway that we give cats. Now, I'm not saying that you should hiss at people when you're overstimulated, but I do think that you should communicate. A lot of people just shut down and they don't know what to say or how to say it. And I want to give you some verbiage of how I would cheer myself up from sensory overwhelm, which definitely I have cried over before because it can be a lot. It can be a lot when you're taking it in. The way I cope is just to say, I'm overstimulated. I'm overstimulated and I need to go somewhere quiet for a little bit. And I stop what I'm doing, assuming I can, and I remove myself from the situation for just a little bit. And I can feel in my body when I start to shift out of that overwhelmed state. Now, here's the problem with being in that overwhelmed state. It leads me almost directly to dysregulation. I am not my best self when I am overstimulated. I'm impressed. I haven't actually hissed at anybody now that I think about it. So I would recommend if you're overstimulated, communicate that you're overstimulated and then go and find yourself some quiet. And that is how you can turn those tears into cheers, from my perspective at least. What do you think, Crimson?
Honestly, I think the overstimulated one and sensory overload is something I did not understand until like the last 5 years of my life, or really becoming a mom. But my husband's super sensitive, like to noises, and he gets overwhelmed very easily. Whereas like I would just be like, how do you even notice those things? I'm not an observant person, but I don't know if it's like the primal instincts that come with having children that you become more in tune with your environment. But now, oh my gosh, I have like 2 kids having different conversations. My husband's playing the banjo in the background. Like it's too much. And yeah, I think I'm finally to the point where I know to just be like, I'm overstimulated, leave me alone. But you can't run away from it. It's a deep breath, tap, cope. Pull out coping skills because it can be so dysregulated.
Absolutely. I agree. If you are in a situation where you cannot leave the space, bilateral stimulation will help you to re-regulate in that moment. You can tap your hands, you can tap your feet, you can tap across their body. You can do it a lot of different ways, okay? But the main thing is to recognize that you are dysregulated. You need to get back to a more regulated space, and you may not have control over the environment around you to get it to stop or to walk away. But you can still regulate if you become overwhelmed by your senses. That is an important piece of this puzzle.
Number 4, health concerns. Triggers for sadness. I'm currently in this one. We found out 2 days before Christmas, my mom has stage 2 melanoma. And luckily, they think surgery will fix it. And we have surgery on in a week. But this is a real one. It's scary.
Yeah. Yeah, it is scary. So how are you coping with it right now?
Avoidance.
I mean, sometimes avoidance is the right answer.
Yeah,
and I think
I'm acting like it's not happening because there's nothing I can do until surgery.
Yeah.
But I know for her, she can't avoid it. And so my empathy is like, I just hate that being with this alone.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really tough, especially so they're going to do surgery and then biopsy it.
Yep, and make sure it's all gone. They think that's it.
So avoidance usually is a good skill to use anytime we are waiting for more information. Avoidance and distraction can be clutch for these moments. I also think there's the added layer of I don't want to say it's harder to cope with, but it's a different thing when you're dealing with somebody else's health and well-being versus your own. Mm-hmm. I don't think any of us like seeing our friends or family members having to go through challenging seasons. And certainly everyone's health presents challenging seasons in their life. And so part of how I cope with that when I'm dealing with somebody else is that I recognize their own journey in the process.
Right.
Like, as much as I don't want to hear that your mom is struggling with this and I don't want her to deal with it, I ground myself back into my existentialist belief system that there's meaning to be made here. There's things to cultivate here. That doesn't make it okay. That doesn't make it something that we want or any less challenging. It just helps me remember where my boundaries are when I'm dealing with somebody else's challenges. And I think that's really important because a lot of times what we will do as humans is we will just try and fix things for other people. And when it comes to our mental health, you can't.
For health in
can't
general.
fix things.
I mean,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
what's so
health in
helpless
general.
about it.
Yeah, you really can't. And so it becomes important to know where those boundaries are and to remind yourself. But I am definitely, you said your mom's having surgery in 2 weeks?
In a week, yeah.
In a week, yeah. Well, I'm anxious for them to get it off of her, to get it biopsied, and for her to move forward with one less funky mole.
Yep.
And a whole lot of health into 2026. And how great it is that they found it and they're able to remove it quickly.
Yep. Number 3, we had family dynamics.
Well,
Do you have advice on that one?
I mean,
I don't feel like I
you
can
know, I'm
give.
trying a really new intensive form of family therapy. It's called living with them. And I don't know that I recommend it.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I do. I look, like, we're in a multi-generational household situation that is good for my unique family situation. It is. I wouldn't be still living in it if it was abusive or unhealthy to the point that we couldn't move forward. That being said, it's a very challenging. And those triggers, then, like, that trauma that you thought you dealt with when you were, like, much younger, well, ooh, doggy, does it come back when you live with your family. But all that being said, there's a flip side to it too, which is that there's a lot of good. There's a lot of help. There's a lot of support. And we're getting time that we didn't get before, you know? And when it comes to family, time is kind of the ultimate currency. I think the thing about family is we need to recognize that everybody, it's kind of going back to my previous point about your mom, is that everybody's on their own journey. You know, everybody is showing up differently equipped. Everybody is showing up with different motivation to get equipped. And everybody is showing up with different mental health, different challenges, different traumas, different histories, and honestly, different values when it comes to even attending to your mental health, right? Some people just don't think that it's important or that it doesn't impact the people around them, which is really difficult. That to me is probably one of the biggest challenging dynamics with family dynamics is when they take poor care of their mental health hygiene and it just kind of seeps out on everybody else around them. And it is hard. It is draining, especially because as you do your own work and you move forward and you realize that nobody else has the responsibility or even ability to come and save you from your own mental health, you have to figure out how to work through it. It gets even more like cringe, nasty to be around people who aren't doing the work.
Right.
Because it does feel a little bit like you didn't put on deodorant and now we all have to sit around your stink today. And that's hard. So one thing I would really suggest, and again, this is kind of similar to what I said with your mom, is know where your boundaries are. I have someone in my life that I desperately want to make happy. I want to make them happy because at a young age, I learned that if I made them happy, they would love me more. That's a messed up message, and we don't need to unpack that today. But what we do need to say is if you are trying so hard to make somebody else happy like that, you're doing it at your own cost. And usually you are in a dysregulated state, you are engaging in fawning behavior, and it sucks. It sucks to be like that. It takes a lot from you. And so an alternative way to deal with this is to build your tolerance to their discomfort. Their discomfort is not yours to fix. And honestly, you probably can't even if you tried.
Right.
Ask me how I know. This is really important to know that when other people are experiencing discomfort around you, it doesn't have to spin you out. You can work to build your tolerance to other people's discomfort. And that's a big part of having healthy boundaries when dealing with family dynamics that cause a lot of sadness, disappointment, grief, anxiety, anger, resentment, whatever it may be. So that's my hot tip.
All right. So the top two were
the top two are work, right?
Work and deadlines. And I got to be honest with you, I have built a boundary on this one. I refuse to lose sleep over work and deadlines. I just can't. I mentally made some kind of snap at some point in my life where I decided I couldn't do it. I drew a line, and again, I don't know if this was becoming a parent, but I feel like this, when I was in corporate and I was running a team and I was running a program, one of the things that people really valued about my contribution was staying cool and calm. I think all of these come down to a lot of its boundaries and communication.
Yes, you have to learn how to compartmentalize. Crimson, you get 333 points for your tears to cheers. I know that the one with your mom and health anxiety was challenging.
You get 1,000 points. Just because I think you had a lot of really good solutions.
Now we have a word from our coping skill of the week, which is crying. Yes, crying is a coping skill. I know that it may not be your favorite coping skill or the most glamorous coping skill or the one that you want to utilize every single day, but it is a coping skill, okay? Because crying is an involuntary neurobiological release mechanism that helps the nervous system discharge emotional load, recalibrate arousal, and signal the need for connection or care. It is not a breakdown, it is a regulation response. And yes, keep in mind, sometimes we even have happy tears, and that is also a regulating response. It's pretty amazing that the coping skill of crying is encoded within us, ready for us to utilize. And I'm tired of our culture shaming it or acting like it's not the amazing tool that it is. You should give yourself permission to use that skill anytime it's needed without judgment or shame. And if other people want to judge your tears or shame them or tell you that they're wrong or weakness, well, good news. That information is all about them, and it has nothing to do with you. We would all be a little bit healthier and happier if we made peace with this part of ourselves and allowed crying to be the natural, encoded coping skill it is for all of us. And that's all from our coping skill of the week. For our next game, we're going to play a round of Kill It With Karaoke when we tell you exactly what karaoke song we would sing to help us deal with the emotion of the week and perform it. And this week, we're talking about sadness, and I'm going to be singing I Will Survive by Gloria Gaynor because nothing makes me feel better than reminding myself of my own agency. At first I was afraid, I was petrified. Go on now, go. Walk out the door. Just turn around now. Did you think I'd crumble? Did you think I'd lay down and die? It took all the strength I had not to fall apart. I used to cry, and I still do, but now I hold my head up high, and I'll survive. I will survive.
That was great, Lori, and there's not any amount of money you can pay me to get me to do that. So, Lori, I would say for that karaoke, since you did make it through the full song, I'm going to give you the full 4,000 points.
Well, that's all for this episode of the Emotional Endurance Movement. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you will take the time to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, as well as make sure to join our newsletter and sign up for our weekly survey. We want to invite you into this and bring you into the fold so that we can all work together on finding fun ways to practice our emotional health hygiene so that we can build our emotional endurance and stay regulated in a dysregulating world. I've been Lori Sharp-Page, and this has been my lovely co-host Crimson McDonald. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope to see you next week.